I want to share my testimony. So, growing up, I am the middle child for my mother. I'm the fourth out of seven that I grew up with my whole life. And my father had seven children before he married my mother. So, there's a lot of kids. And there's multiple marriages and multiple divorces. So, my childhood there was no guarantees, there was no absolutes. It was just, what was happening in that decade. So we didn't go to church. We didn't talk about God. We didn't pray. And honestly, from my childhood, I don't remember anybody that did, ever. Like, literally ever. I grew up in Arizona, in Phoenix, and that's where I was born. And we lived in Maryvale, the Maryvale area of Phoenix. So I went to Desert Sands Junior High, and I don't remember a single Christian. Not one. I mean, maybe there was one, but nobody ever said anything if they were. Like, they didn't live it out or, talk about it in a bold way. When I was in high school, my mom, she had already divorced my dad when I was in elementary school, and she was remarried, and she was divorcing my stepdad, and we were moving to Utah. And when we moved to Utah, out of all the seven children, it was just three of us going to Utah with my mom. The rest weren't going. They were doing their own thing. Like, one ran away, one joined the military, one went with my dad. It was just, we were split up all over the country. So I went to Utah. I was the oldest that went, and my younger brother and sister went with, just two of them. One of my younger brothers went to Texas. So I was kind of helpful to my mom. She needed me as the oldest one to help, just do things while she was working, because she was working full time and, trying to make it without a bad situation. So I knew how much she needed me. And sometimes I would take advantage of that and not be such a great person. So because of my father's age, he was really old. We were able to get Social Security because my dad was a senior citizen when I was born. And I used that against my mom. I would take it and spend it and, I'm going to move in with my friend. And I was just kind of a butt. I mean, just to be honest, I was a butt. But I didn't know any better, whatever. So eventually my mom got married again and moved to Canada and took my little sister to Canada. And then my little brother was in and out of trouble his whole childhood. Very sad, very sad. He ended up in jail and prison and just various places. I ended up I had multiple roommates. I mean, I tried everything when I was younger. I just very misguided and didn't really know what love was, and was trying to figure it out myself and making all the wrong choices to do that. But I eventually met someone that we decided on the literal spur of the moment we were going to get married. And I'm like, okay. So that had never crossed my mind before. We flew away to Vegas, didn't tell anybody, got married. And a year later, my daughter was born. So I was still living in Utah. And when my daughter was born, it changed my world, like instantly changed my world. We were, living in the world. We were partying and having fun and doing whatever. And when I found out I was pregnant, I was like, oh my gosh, I got to be a good mom. I mean, my mom was healthy and she, never did drugs or drinking or anything like that. She just made a lot of bad choices in men. So I knew how to take care of a baby. And so I quit drinking. I quit smoking. I quit, drinking Pepsi and just the things I knew were very unhealthy. And I thought, oh, look at me. I'm straightening up my life and I'm going to be a good mom and I'm going to be responsible. And I really thought that that's all it was. Like, that's all I had to do, and just stay married. Don't get divorced, no matter what. No divorce, and be a family. That was what I thought I needed to do. So that was in Utah. Then I got pregnant again, and we moved to Idaho. We were trying to buy a house and couldn't qualify for anything in Utah. It was very expensive. So we moved to Idaho, and my son was born in Idaho. And that didn't last long. Like, we were only there maybe 8 months, and then got a different job in California. So we left Idaho, went to California, was living in California, and got pregnant with my third child. And my husband got a job offer in South Carolina. And in California, we were able to buy our first house. It was a little condo, and it was great. It was more than anybody else in my family ever had. And so I was pretty happy with that. But California was very expensive. So I was like, yeah, sure, whatever. Let's go to South Carolina. Who knew? This was before the internet, okay? So we didn't know what South Carolina was all about. I just knew it was cheaper. So we ended up in South Carolina. And that's where my third child was born, in South Carolina. And throughout this whole time, I didn't know anybody that went to church or anything ever. It was never brought up in any social circle whatsoever. I did make a friend in California at a child play group that was a Christian, and she would invite me to church a couple times, and I just said, no, I don't want to go to church. Why would I want to do that? And I just had a bad experience in Utah with a religion that's dominant in Utah, that it was very, I don't know the right word. It was almost oppressive when I was in high school, because it was pressured to do what they were doing, or you were nothing and nobody and you were never going to fit in. Well, I never fit in. I couldn't have anybody tell me what to do. And when we lived in Utah, my mom joined a church that was a cult. They went on Saturday. They celebrated all the Jewish holidays. They didn't celebrate birthdays or Christmas or anything like that. It was kind of strange. And I got kicked out of that church because I wouldn't do what they told me to do. They had to sit down with me because I was being mean to my mom. And I basically mouthed off to them. And so they said I just wasn't welcome to come back, which was fine by me. That was exactly what I wanted. So that was my only church experience, was maybe a year in Utah. And I didn't want anything to do with that. So anyway, fast forward again, 3 kids later, we're in South Carolina, and we were looking to buy a house, and we had sold our little condo in California, and we went with a realtor, looked around. We ended up finding a home that was for sale by owner, and it was just wonderful. We went and looked, and the man that was selling the house, he was 100% a Christian. Like, I knew just by looking around his home and just talking to him that he was a Christian. And my kids immediately bonded with his kids when we were there. And mind you, I'm 9 months pregnant when we're looking at this house. So the guy, after we bought his house, he, gave me his phone number and says, hey, you guys are new to the area. If you ever need anything, give me a call. Well, I was 9 months pregnant, so I needed a lot of things. And I only called him once, and I just asked him if he knew of any place that was a daycare to help me with my other 2 children, because I was getting ready to have my third, and I was basically ready to rip my hair out because I was alone. I was 3,000 miles away from my family, and I didn't have anybody help me. So I called him, and he said, yeah, actually, my church has a daycare, and I could just do like 2 days a week for 2 hours. It was just something to, give me time to take a shower, pretty much. So I called, and his church it was a Methodist church, but they didn't have any room in their daycare. And so they said, try this other church down the road. So there was a Baptist church that was down the street from my house that had room for my 2-year-old and my 4-year-old to go for 2 hours a day, 2 days a week. So it was just a break, go shopping, do things that I needed to do without 2 kids hanging on a pregnant woman. I got them in this preschool, and I felt safe. I felt like, yeah, they'll be safe at a church preschool. And it was just, I felt good about it. So fast forward a few months, my 4-year-old, she come home begging to go to church. She wanted to go to church on Sunday with all her friends, and she wanted to wear pretty dresses. And this little girl, let me tell you, she was fluffy as they come, and that was my nickname for her, was Fluffy. She wanted to wear dresses. She wanted to go to church on Sunday. Well, she was relentless, and she kept this up for over a year. So when she was 5, and after my 3rd was born, she wouldn't stop. And I mean, she wouldn't stop. She kept begging me, and I just kept putting her off. And I'm like, yeah, we'll go someday. We'll go someday. And in the meantime, I was going to this gym to work out, and I met this girl. She was telling me, she invited me every single week to go to church with her, and I just, no, I'm not going. Finally, like 6 months later, she kept asking me, and she's like, oh, we have this MOPS group, Mothers of Preschoolers, and you could come. It's at our church, but it's like a Tuesday morning or something. And I said, oh, okay. So I thought I could trick my 5-year-old into thinking we're going to church, and we could go to MOPS group, which is just Mothers of Preschoolers, and they're playing, and the moms get to do a craft and whatever. So I felt like, yeah, I can do that. So I went, and at that MOPS group, it was the first time I ever heard somebody pray. And it still makes me cry, because I just sat there, and I heard this woman get up there and just pray. They were asking for prayer requests, and I was just looking around. I mean, I didn't say anything. I just was very quiet. But they prayed for other people in the room, for different things that were going on. And it just, a flood of emotions came over me. I had never in my life, and I'm 30-something years old by now, the first time I heard somebody pray. I think I was 32 or 33. And I kept going to MOPS for the whole year. My friend kept inviting me to go to church, and I'm like, yeah, no, I'm not going. I didn't want to go to church. And I was making friends with the women at MOPS, and my friend from the gym said, hey, why don't you come on Wednesday? And Audrey was still begging me to go to church, my oldest daughter. She was still begging me to go to church on Sunday. She really wanted to go. And my friend was also inviting me to Wednesday nights. She's like, oh, hey, it's just the moms. We're doing a Bible study on Wednesday. And I said, oh, I could probably do that, and Audrey could go to church. It was always about her. And so I went, and my kids went to a missionary kid class, and I went to the Wednesday night Bible study. And the first week I went, I was basically a visitor. They handed me a workbook, and it was called The Virtuous Woman, the Psalms 31 woman. And they were halfway through it at the time. And so I took the book home, and I knew I was going to go back the next week because my kids were bouncing off the walls, and they were having so much fun, and they wanted to go back. And I took the book home, and I was so afraid of what everybody was going to think of me that I didn't fit in, and that they would know right away. And I opened up the book to answer the questions because I wanted to be prepared for the class the next week. And I realized I couldn't answer any of the questions because I didn't have a Bible to look up the verses and what they were talking about. And so I called my friend up, and I says, hey, I don't have a Bible to answer these questions. I think I need one. And so she, within minutes, was at my house giving me her Bible. And I used it, and I still was stuck. I was stuck. I didn't understand the questions. And I was reading the little parts in the Bible, and I didn't understand what it meant. And the part of the book that they were at was the woman at the well, ever so fittingly. And I called my friend, and I said, look, I don't get this. I just don't understand what they're talking about. I don't know about this living water and what it is. Like, I want to understand. I don't want to look dumb. And she kind of freaked out. And she was a brand new Christian. I didn't know it. She was less than 2 years that she was a Christian. And she sent the Bible study leader over to my house to talk to me. And I welcomed that. I'm like, yeah, come on over. Come explain this to me because I don't get it. And I want to be ready for class on Wednesday. So she came over to my house and she explained to me about the living water and about Jesus being what we needed. That was the only satisfaction, that we needed his living water in us in order to be satisfied. And I finally got it. And I'm like, I need that. I need that living water. And these women, I had been drawn to all of them. They were so incredibly nice and kind. And there was just something about them. I wanted to be around them. I loved being with them. And so right there in 2001, I sat in my living room and I prayed with my class leader to accept Jesus as my Savior. And I understood. And all of a sudden, like a floodgate was opened in my mind. And I understood. I started to understand. And I was praying. I'm like, just show me the truth. Show me what to do. And so I kind of went nuts. And I couldn't get enough. I was reading everything. I was reading every book I could find. I kept going to the MOPS. I kept going to the Bible study. And then they were like, oh, you need to come to church. You need to come to church on Sunday. And I was still scared. I was reluctant to go to church because I didn't want to get into a false church like my mom's that she was in and other religions that I knew just weren't right. There was too many red flags. And so I refused to go to this church immediately. And I got out the phone book. And for like the next 6 to 8 weeks, I visited a different type of church in South Carolina every weekend. I went to Pentecostal, I went to Lutheran, I went to Methodist, I went to Baptist, I went to Episcopalian, I went to the Church of God, I went to just all different types of churches. And I realized, wow, they're very different. So then I thought, I need to know way more. And I started looking at their doctrines on the websites and trying to understand it and try to see if it made sense. And I just asked God to point me in the right direction. It took me a few months after accepting Christ, but I ended up going to a Baptist church. And it's funny, they didn't even have a pastor. I didn't care. It was the body of believers that I needed. And it was my friends that were in the MOPS and the Bible study. I realized Baptist was good and it was fine. And so at that time, they didn't have a pastor. They had a different speaker every week. And I didn't care because the church, in my mind, was the people that embraced me where I was. So to me, that has always been church. It's always been the people. It's not the building. It's not the preacher. It's the people. And so that's how I found Jesus. And I just praise God for that every day. We've had a long journey, and hopefully I'll make some more videos and I'll tell you what happens next, because it's nothing short of a miracle all the time. Yeah. Thank you, Jesus.